Welcome back. In the last video, we got started on creating the site folder that's going to contain our website. And if I come over here to the Files panel, you can see the folder structure that we've created. We created 4 top-level folders: CSS, Images, JavaScript, and PHP. And inside of the Images folder, I created Icons, Nav, PNG, and RAW. And again, you create these folders simply by right-clicking and doing New Folder. I also created a couple of CSS files in here, print CSS and styles.css, and a couple of HTML files. We also added some scripts, but we'll talk about that later. And again, the way you create a file is you just simply right-click and do New File, and you go ahead and name it whatever you want. In the case of a style sheet, I would call it sample.css. And to delete a file, you just simply right-click, edit, and delete. Now in this video, what I want to do is I want to go over the basics of HTML with you. Now we could spend probably the better part of a couple days going through all the ins and outs of HTML. And if you're interested in really learning HTML well, I have a video series on HTML. But what we're going to do in this video is just really quickly take you through a crash course in the essentials of HTML so that you can understand what we're doing when we're actually creating the site. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and collapse those folders, and you can see little plus and minus signs that allow me to expand and contract those folders. And I'm going to go ahead and right click up here at the top and do New Folder, and I'm just going to call this one Sample. And then I'm going to create an HTML file inside of that folder. I'm just going to right click on that and do New File, and I'm just going to leave it untitled.html. To open this file up, we're going to go ahead and double click on it, and you can see the file opening up here. Now there are a couple different views that you can work in inside of Dreamweaver. There's Design View, which we're not going to work in too much. This is a really good view for when you're adding content to your pages. But when you're actually laying out the page, creating the structure for it, you're going to be in Code View. So most of our time is going to be spent in Code View. And again, you can switch back and forth between those as much as you want. You also have Split View here, which shows you the Code View on the left and the Design View on the right. And you can see again, this is just a blank page. But either way, as you modify one, the other will be updated because they're just two views of the same file. For example, if I was to type hello here, you can see over in the code section, it placed that content in there. If I was to go ahead and delete that and click back in my Design View, hello disappears. So two views of the exact same file, but again, we're going to be working in Code View here. Design View is really limits what you can do effectively inside of Dreamweaver. So I'm going to go into Code View here, and again, you can see Dreamweaver sort of added some sample content here for me. And what I'm going to do is, because I don't like the way they set up the document here, I'm going to go ahead and go to Edit and click Select All, and then press the Delete key to wipe all that out and save it. And that's where we want to begin, with just a blank HTML file. And this is the perfect place to begin. Now, HTML files have the same structure to them regardless of where they're at. You're always going to begin an HTML file with HTML tags, which brings up the subject of what is an HTML tag. Basically, what you have is you have a tag, and that tag is contained in opening and closing brackets, which are less than and greater than symbols. So this is an example of a tag. Now, where there's an opening tag, there always needs to be a closing tag. And if I do another bracket and then a slash tag, that's an example of a closing tag. So I can open a tag up like this, and I can close a tag just like this. Now, putting this into making this for real because the word tag is not actually a valid HTML tag. Let's say I wanted a paragraph to appear on the page. I could do open bracket P close bracket, and what that's going to tell the browser is this is a paragraph of text. And then I'm going to go ahead and type sample paragraph. Whoops. Now, the browser needs to know when that paragraph ends, so what we're going to go ahead and do is do a closing P tag. And again, that's a bracket followed by a slash followed by the tag name, which in this case is P, followed by a closing tag. So whenever you're writing commands out inside of HTML, you're always going to have an opening tag followed by a closing tag. And if this seems a little bit confusing at first, stick with me. This will start to make more sense as we build our sample page here. Now, HTML tags are divided into two different groups, really. There are structural HTML tags, and there are semantic HTML tags. Structural HTML tags give your page structure. They define the different elements of your page. Whereas semantic HTML is used to contain content. For example, the P tag that we just looked at is a paragraph tag. That tag tells the browser something about that content, that it's a paragraph. Another example of a semantic tag in HTML would be the heading tags. H1 is a first level heading. H2 would be a second level heading. If you had a list of information, the different list items would be contained in LI tags. So semantic tags are probably easier to understand than structural tags because their name always relates to what they do. Structural HTML tags, again, they define the structure of your page. Now, the first thing that every HTML page needs to have is an HTML tag. And this tells the browser that you're writing HTML and not JavaScript or some other coding language. And again, where there's an opening tag, there always needs to be a closing tag. So I'm going to hit enter a few times and type the closing HTML tag here. And again, that's just the bracket with the slash and the tag name on it. From now on, I'm just going to call this open HTML tag and close HTML tag. I won't bother to mention the brackets or the slash. So everything in between this opening HTML tag and this closing HTML tag is going to contain HTML code. Now, HTML documents are divided into two sections, a head section and a body section. And just as you would probably suspect, you go ahead and define the head section by creating an opening head tag and then creating a closing head tag. So everything in between these two tags is going to be the head information for the document. I'll hit enter a couple of times, and the second major section in every HTML document is going to be the body section. And so I'm going to go ahead and open a body tag up here and close a body tag. Now, here's the difference between these two sections. Anytime you're trying to tell the browser something, for instance, the title of a page, or some meta tag information for search engine, or links to scripts or CSS files, anything the browser is really concerned with is going to go into your head section. The content that the user or your visitor is going to see, such as headings and paragraphs of text, images, things like that, that's always going to be contained in the body section of your document. Now, for the head section, all we're going to do is go ahead and title the page. And to do that, you're going to go ahead and do a title tag. And inside of the title tag, I'm going to go ahead and type HTML learning page. Oops. And then I'm going to go ahead and close my title tag. So when the browser opens this up, the title for the browser window is going to be sample or HTML learning page. And that's all we're going to do in the head section right now. We're going to add more things later on, and you'll see how that works more in just a little bit. Now again, the body section is going to contain the content for the page. Now if I actually look at this page, I won't see anything because the body area is completely empty. If I click on design here, now I'm in design view, and you can even go into live view here and see the way it would look in a browser. So nothing is in our page right now. And again, the title is the title for the browser window, not a title that actually appears on the page. And you'll see that again in just a little bit. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to put a heading on this page. And the headings are always going to be H1. Oops, I capitalized that. It should be lowercase. H1. Actually, it doesn't matter whether it's upper or lowercase, but most people type their tag names out in lowercase. And I'm going to go ahead and type welcome to my website. And again, this is an H1 tag. It's a first level heading. You can also have H2 tags for second level headings, H3 tags, 4, 5, and all the way down to H6. And you can kind of think of this like an outline of your site. So now I've actually placed some content on the page. I'm going to save it by going to File, Save, or Control S, and then go into Design View, and there we go. There's our first bit of content inside of H1 tags. So again, heading, instructions for the browser. The body section is going to be content that you're going to show your user. I'll go ahead and hit enter here, and now let's say we want a paragraph of text. For that, just like we did before, I'm going to go ahead and do, an opening P tag right now. And I'm going to go ahead and type, this is a paragraph. And then I'm going to go ahead and close that off. I'll save this. And actually, since we've got a kind of a thin design here, I'm just going to go into split view here and click, and you'll see there's my heading. And there is my paragraph of text. And actually, this is one way Dreamweaver really shines as a code editor. You can see as I highlight this text up here, the text that represents in my code view is also being highlighted. And you can see, since this is a heading, it's big and bold. If I highlight this paragraph, that gets highlighted. And notice it didn't highlight the tags, it just highlighted the text itself. If I was to highlight something over here, the reverse is not true. If you highlight something in code view, it's not going to highlight it over here. It just works this way. So if you're ever wondering, you're looking at code view and you can't find something, you can always highlight your text and have it appear over here in code view. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit enter here, and I'm going to type a second tag. And this is going to be an H2 tag. So I'll type, this is a subheading. And again, I'm going to go ahead and close that H2 tag with the slash. And there's my subheading. And you can see that it's smaller than the H1 tags. So putting text into your web page is very, very simple. Now the next thing that you're probably going to want to do is you're going to want to learn how to create lists inside of HTML. And lists in HTML aren't just for bulleted or numbered lists. There's lots of things you can do with them, such as creating navigation systems. So they're very common, and almost every website is going to have a list of information. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter a couple times, and notice I've got a blank line here in between my subheading and where I'm going to start typing. And I want a bulleted list. And in HTML, we call a bulleted list an unordered list, or a UL. The opposite of an unordered list is an ordered list, and that starts with the OL tag. So you have UL, unordered lists, and you have OL, ordered lists. And again, this is just an overview. It's not an in-depth covering of HTML. This is just sort of meant to give you a reference point for when we actually start beginning to build the page. So I'm going to go ahead and do UL to open that unordered list. And then I'm going to hit enter a few times, and I'm going to go ahead and close my UL. Now inside of this is where the individual list items are going to go. I'm going to indent this a little bit just to show you. And I'm going to do LI, and I'm going to do sample list item. And then I'm going to close my LI tag. And again, UL, unordered list, LI, list item within the unordered list. And then I'll hit enter, and I'll go ahead and do LI again. And I'm going to say another item. And we'll do one more, so we're going to have 3 items here. And I'm going to say final item. And again, I'm going to close my list item. Now notice that there are these blank lines here. And again, I'm going to save my document by going to File, Save. You can also do Control S. I'm going to assume that you're regularly saving your document, so I'm not going to say you should save your document at any one point. And then I'm going to go ahead and click over here in my design view, and you'll see there is an unordered list of elements on my page. And you'll see it's bulleted. Notice that there are no blank spaces in here. If I was to hit enter and put a blank line in between the first and second item, that still doesn't change anything over here. Browsers completely ignore extra line breaks and white space. So you can feel free to indent and to sort of arrange your code in any way that's most readable for you. And a lot of people do that with indents and extra spaces and things like that. So I'm going to come in here and delete these extra lines because we really don't need them. And save it, and you'll see nothing changed over here. As a matter of fact, what I could do is I could hit backspace and I could put the first list item on the same line as UL and do that again right here. And one more time for the closing UL. So now the unordered list tags along with the 3 list items are all on the same line. And if I was to go ahead and come in here to design view right up here on top, you're going to see they're still listed as a list item. The browser doesn't take into account line breaks or spacing in the code. But again, this is not very readable, whereas if I do this and take it back to where I was, you can see how this is more readable as an unordered list. So always break things out into separate lines in your HTML, and make sure you indent things that are sub-items of other things, like these list items being sub-entries underneath the UL. And I'm going to go ahead and save this and go back into split view so you can see this here. Now I'm going to hit enter another couple of times, and I'm going to put an image into our page or onto our page. And to put an image onto your page, you're going to do the IMG tag. Now this is going to be a little bit different because you don't do opening and closing IM tags or image tags like you do other semantic tags where you have an opening tag and a closing tag. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. For an image tag, what you're going to do is you're going to do an opening bracket and then the tag name IMG. And then you're going to type a space. And this is where Dreamweaver's coding hints can really come in useful to you. And the reason why a lot of people really like Dreamweaver for coding. I have the tag name here, and I hit enter. And now I'm going to go ahead and type S. And you're going to see it brings me down to these choices here. And if I do SR, it narrows it in even more. And I do want to define what the source is going to be for this image. So I'm going to go ahead and hit SRC. And you'll see it finished the entry there and did an equals and then a double quotation mark. It also brought up this little tip that says browse here, which is going to allow me to use the file editor to go and select an image for this this site. So I am going to go ahead and hit enter here to bring me into a browse button. Now I actually didn't put any images inside of my images folder. And normally you will copy whatever image you're working on into these folders. But I'm going to go ahead and go into a different folder, and I'm just going to go ahead and grab a sample picture here. I'm going to use this yellow flower or this red flower. I'll hit OK there, and it's going to say this file is outside the root folder of Shear's design and may not be accessible when you publish the site. Your root folder is this. Do you want to copy the file there? You're always going to want to do that. Otherwise, when you actually publish this site, you won't be able to see that image because it won't be part of the actual website. So I'm going to go ahead and click yes here, and it's going to ask me to save the file. I'm going to go into the images folder, and this is what I'm going to call it, Chrysanthemum JPEG, and I'm just going to hit save there. And you're going to see that it put the path to that image file into the quotation marks after source. Now this is actually not called a tag. Image is a tag. This is actually an attribute. Attributes always tell you something about an HTML tag. In this case I have the HTML tag image, and I'm saying the source file for this image is going to be this file right here that I've saved in the images folder called Chrysanthemum JPEG. Now there are other features that you can, other attributes you can put in here to further modify this image. But for right now I'm done. So I want to type a closing slash and then a closing bracket. And that's going to go ahead and put an image into my document. And again, if this is a little bit rough for you right now, don't worry, keep going. This will start to make more sense to you. I'll go ahead and save this file, and when I go into design view this time, you're going to see, wow, there's that big image file there. And I'll go back into code view. Now, a couple of the most common attributes to put on an image after you define the source is the width and the height of the image. So I can go ahead and click here right after the closing quotation mark and type a space, and you're going to see that list comes up again. And these are all of the attributes that can be used in this particular tag. And the attribute that I'm actually looking for is the width attribute. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and you're going to see again it says width equals and then a double quotation mark. And I'm going to go ahead, that's the width of the existing image. We know it's 1024 pixels across. I don't want it to be that big though, so I'm just going to type 400 because I want it to be 400 pixels wide. And then if I define the width, I should also define the height. So I'm going to go and do the same thing, only I'm going to make the height 250 pixels. Attributes always take on this format. They're always going to be inside of a tag, and they're always going to have the attribute name, an equal sign, and then inside of quotation marks you're going to have the value, which in case of the source is going to be the path to the image. In the case of the width and the height attributes, the value inside of quotation marks is going to be the width and the height in pixels. So let's go ahead now and save this and go back into design view, and you can see my picture is now smaller. And you can actually define the width and the height either in your CSS that we'll talk about later, or you can define it inside of the HTML. Now, the next thing we would want to do is we want to see how to put a link into our page. And let's say I want a link to my home page, timothywebdesign.com, to come below this image. I'm going to go ahead and go back into the code view here. And again, I'm going to hit enter a couple times. Remember, you can put as much white space in as you want. links are always kept inside of what are called A tags. So I'm going to go ahead and do opening bracket A. Now, I need to know several things about this link. The one essential thing I need to know is what is the link, or what is the hyperlink pointing to? What is it referencing? And the attribute you use to define the target of a link is going to be the href attribute. So you can see href equals, and in quotation marks, I put the full path to an outside website, or the relative path if I'm pointing to a page inside of my site. For right now, and you'll see more about that later, but for right now I want it to point to my web page. So I'm going to do http:// www.timothywebdesign.com. And if this was a real long path, you could always open up a browser, go to that page, copy it from your browser's address line, and then paste it into this particular attribute there. So now I'm going to click outside of the link, and I'm going to hit space. Now I don't want to put any more attributes in to this opening A tag. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and do the closing bracket. Now notice this is a little bit different. I didn't do the closing slash because the tag, or the line, is not over yet. I still have some content that I want to place in this particular link. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and I'm going to go into design view here, and you'll see I don't have anything at all here. So I'm going to go into code view, and I'm going to go ahead and say visit Timothy Web Design. And then I'm going to go ahead and close my A tag. Let's save it. Let's see what this gave us. I'm going to go into design view, and sure enough, there's visit Timothy Web Design. And you're going to notice that it's on the same line as this image here. And that's because images and A tags, image tags and A tags, are what they call inline elements, meaning they don't have an automatic line break after them. That's not going to be a problem, but you can see the way we define a hyperlink. Again, looking here in the code, we open an A tag, and then we put the link right here inside of the href. After we close the opening A tag, we're going to go ahead and say visit timothywebdesign.com, and then we're going to go ahead and close that A tag. So that's all there is to creating a link. Now, if you wanted this to be on its own line, there are several ways to do that, but the most common way is to put a break in. So I'm going to click here on the line in between these two. I don't actually have to do that. I could put this up here, or I could put it right over here, but I'm going to put it in the middle. And I'm going to do an opening bracket, BR, space, a slash, and then a closing bracket. And that's the code that tells the browser to put a line break in. I'm going to go ahead and save this, and then I'm going to go ahead and go into design view, and now you can see that's on a different line. So far we've gone ahead and we've learned how to set up a basic page inside of Dreamweaver. We've also learned how to put text tags in, such as the H1 tag and the P tag. We've created a list of information here with the UL and the LI tag, and then we added an image and a link. And again, this is all by way of sort of explaining the code that you're going to use to build your website. Dreamweaver will do a lot of this work for you, but you've got to understand the code that Dreamweaver is writing for you in order to modify it to make it do what you want it to actually do. Now, so far, everything that we've put in here has been a semantic tag, meaning it has something to do with what type of content you're putting in. The body tag is an example of a structural tag, and it defines the body of your page. Whereas the head tag is also structural. It defines instructions for the browser. Now, whenever you're setting up a web page, you're also going to need to divide the content up into individual segments. Now, let me go ahead and show you what I mean by that. If we go ahead now and look at the sample project file, let me go ahead and open that one up for you here. I'm going to go ahead and come in here, and I'm going to go into my completed website here, and I'm going to go ahead and open up my home page and go into live view here. And you're going to see, actually it takes just a second for that image to appear, we do have some distinct sections here on our page. Here's the section for the heading information, not the head area, but sort of the banner for the page. And you can see that's actually divided into two sections here. We've got the logo and the catchphrase here, and we've got some social media icons over here. So we have the heading section or the banner section of the page, and we have two sections inside of that. Then down below that, we actually have the top navigation section. So that's another distinct division or section of the page. Coming down a little bit more, we have this image here, which is the sub banner. So that's another section on the page. And then we have this content area right here, and this right side area right over here. And finally, we have the footer down here at the bottom. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 distinct divisions of content on this page. When you're creating the HTML, and I'm going to come in here to the code here, you're going to see that I have this div tag right here. And you're going to see the div tag separates the different sections of content. For example, here I have the div tag that opens the top navigation section. And here's the unordered list that forms those links. And again, you can see the UL tag, the LI tag, composing the individual items, and then you have the links in the middle here inside of these A tags. But again, what I want you to focus on right now here is we have a div tag that's opening that section and then down here closing the section. If I come up here to the top, we have the banner, and there's our logo right there. We have a div here for our social media icons, and there are all of our social media icons, and again you can see the list items and the A tags forming the links. Let's come back in here to our untitled section, and let's say this was a distinct section of code, this was a distinct section of code, and this was also. All I have to do to divide those up is simply put in these div tags. Whoops. Need to do an opening bracket, the word div, and a closing. Click down here and do div again. And what I usually do is I highlight these and press tab once to indent them in. And then we're going to have another div here for this unordered list. Whoops. And then we're going to go ahead and close that div right down there. And again, I'll sort of indent those in so it's more obvious that these are contained within these tags. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and put a div down here at the bottom. And again, I'll click after the link and put that in there, indent those in, and save. So now we actually have 3 areas of content that are defined by these div statements. I'll save this, and when we look at it in design view, nothing looks different here. But logically, we've divided up the content. So we can then refer to those individual divs when we're doing different kinds of styling. I'm going to come back into my index here, and I want you to notice one other thing about the divs that I've created here. After each one, you have the attribute ID. And after that, you have equals, and inside of quotation marks, the name that I'm giving to this div. Or I should say the ID that I'm giving to this div. Every section of content should have its own name. That way, I can style this logo differently than the div and the content that's in this social media. You can see here in my code view, the social media icons are kept in list items, and the navigation menu at the top are also list items. But when you look in here, this doesn't look like a list, and this doesn't look like a list either. And that's because with CSS, I'm styling it differently. So again, I'm going to come into my HTML code here, and I could give these divs a name just simply by clicking in the opening div tag, typing a space, and doing ID equals quote, and then whatever I want to call it. I'm going to call this one 1. I'm going to go ahead and call this one 2. And I'm going to call this one, I'm going to give this, whoops, hit enter there too quickly. I'm going to go ahead and call this one 3. And again, the only thing that sees, or the only thing that cares about these IDs is the actual browser. But they are very, very important. So now I've just given these divs the names 1, 2, and 3. They can be called whatever you want. If this was a real page, I would give them names that have some meaning. For example, in our real example here, I've gone ahead and called this div banner. I've called this div social media icons. This div top nav. This div slider, because it's the one that has this sliding image on it. And then we have the right side div, the content div, and finally we have the footer div. So you always give your IDs something, a name that's meaningful, so it's easy to identify and remember and refer back to it. I'll come back here to my HTML file, and that's all there is to creating a simple HTML page and adding some content onto it. And I know this was a lot of information. Don't worry about getting bogged down in the details. As we actually go through building this site, you're going to see these actually in action, and they will make a lot more sense after you've actually used them. So in the next video, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and begin to create the HTML structure for our pages, and then we'll get into CSS a little bit more. So I'll see you in the next video.